but I immediately was realizing, oh, I'm in a place where you really can't challenge the narrative.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Wake Up and Win. We're your hosts,
Christina Foray
and Blaise Foray. It's great to have you on the show today, folks, just listening in. If you're here, then you are here to hear from my good friend of, I guess we're going on 15 years now, Austin? It's 2008 was when we met, right?
Yeah, 17 years.
17.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we met when we were
17
9.
years.
We met when we were 9 years old. We were part of CEC. Not really. No, but Austin and I go way back to 2008, and he's a great friend of mine. And over the years, since I left in 2012 or 13, we've kept in touch off and on. And just a great friend, just been a great guy to always have as a friend and to reach out to. He was in our wedding as well. And then I guess you met Christina in 2000.
At our wedding.
At our wedding, yeah. And I told you about Christina, and you asked me about 75 questions before, just to make sure you approved. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember you telling me, you were like, well, he wants to know if I would still love you if your arms and legs fell off.
You
like,
did
"What'd
ask
you
me
say?"
questions. I said, of course. But, interestingly enough, the arms and legs situation, we are talking about the prophetic history and disease known to man and the healing movement. So tonight we're going to have Austin, better known on Twitter as Starcasm. And Austin's family goes back in Kansas City. I mean, they're originally from Kansas City, and they go back all the way to, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s. And so your parents were part of IHOPKC at the very beginning and part of Metro Christian Fellowship before they transitioned to IHOP. So you got a lot of history in Kansas City, and you know a lot of people. And what I'm finding on Twitter is that as all this has been unfolding, people are reaching out to you with a lot of information. I know you're biting your tongue most of the time, probably. You probably share about 10% of what people are sending you, which is why people trust you with their information. And so I'll say this too, when Austin and I and our other friend left IHOPKC in 2012, Austin started questioning the prophetic history pretty quickly, publicly in 2013. And I was telling Christina today, she was like, well, what did you think about that? I said, honestly, for me, I questioned all the theology of IHOP, and I was swinging a completely different way with the theology. So I wasn't afraid to question the theology, but I never really questioned the prophetic history. It was almost like there was a, do not touch, thou shalt not touch this holy prophetic history. For me, I had listened to hours and hours of that thing since early 2004 was my first time listening to the entire prophetic history through. And then again, probably in 2005, and I purchased the 16 set DVDs or 10 set DVDs, 16 hours. And I inundated myself with it because it was so exciting. Bob Jones, Paul Cain, Mike Bickle tells the stories for hours and hours and hours. And I memorized so many of them. And you find that with the prophetic history, I was telling Christina today, he would set it up, Mike would set it up with, the psalm that says, share these things with the next generation and the next generation, share these God stories with the generations to come. And that, of course, was about the children of Israel crossing the Jordan River and crossing the Red Sea and the stories of the Exodus. That's what he was talking about, share the stories. But Mike would utilize that scripture and say, these are the God stories about our movement, and really what led to, at the end of the day, Mike's movement. And so there's so many layers to this. And if you're just joining us, you might go, my head is spinning, I don't get this. Just know that we'll try to do like a broad strokes here, and then we'll get into some of the deep dive. And Christina, not having been at IHOP, never went there, she will definitely insert as you talk, Austin, and we talk. And I'm sure she's going to insert questions from an outsider's perspective, like, okay, what does that mean? What is that? Break that down for us. So we're good, though, tonight. We're going to go on for a good, at least an hour, maybe longer, hour and a half, maybe. And we may end up doing a part two because this is definitely on everybody's mind since the KC Star article came out today about questioning the prophetic history. So that said, Austin, I guess you can introduce yourself a little bit as well, and then we can dive right in, and we'll just start throwing the questions at you as you start talking.
That sounds great. Well, thank you guys for having me on. Really appreciate it. And it's great to have an outsider with us tonight, Christina. And that's just my terrible humor. It's good to have one person in the conversation.
It's great to have a Gentile.
Who's not an ex-cult member.
It's great to have a Samaritan with us tonight.
Yeah, it really is good. Yeah, I was just thinking about when we met, Blaise, and then one thing I always have in mind, because I now live with her, is you introduced me to my wife, and so that was awesome in 2008, and then my wife and I got married in 2015, and then
you live with your wife? What? That's incredible.
So it's kind of always a reminder of you and you guys when we have an anniversary or whatever, and so. But
awesome.
That's cool.
But yeah, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I was thinking about when I met Christina also, and
who I actually happen to live with. I actually happen to live with Christina.
That's good.
I'm sorry, I cannot hang out with you on this thing without telling jokes.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, just keep going.
Yeah, well, this will be fun too, because people I think aren't used to me talking around a friend also, so it'll be fun. But I remember hearing about you Christina, and of course at first being super suspicious, and and I remember having 100 questions. I'm like, I'm gonna grill this chick, whoever she is, and but I also remember now looking back, I remember thinking, I wonder if I really remember this. I wonder if she can handle Blaise, but specifically because I knew we were coming out of a cult, and I was seeing it affect my life. I remember thinking like, I don't know if she can handle it. I don't know if she. Who knows? And then when we met in person, it went even further. I remember meeting you briefly, but then a little bit later, having some more time with you. And every time I was around you guys, I remember just wanting to talk about IHOP. I'm just wanting to talk about IHOP with Blaise, and I'm like kind of looking over at you, like realizing, like being very self-conscious actually, which I'm usually not. I remember being self-conscious, like, oh my gosh, all this is like inside jokes, inside terms, inside stories, inside information. And I remember thinking like trying to make it relatable to you somehow, like to maybe draw you in a little bit, and then just giving up and being like, and really realizing like, oh my gosh, I am like trying to process this cult time that I really haven't processed, because I'm just trying to figure out how to get an income or something. And so then as soon as Blaise is there, I'm like, I'm like kind of grabbing onto you, like, okay, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like I'm just discussing all this stuff, processing all this stuff, and then I'm realizing like processing this cult. In processing this cult, I'm being really culty.
You're like, would you like to join our ex cult?
Yes, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, is Christina like, what is she gonna think about all this? And because it doesn't get better, it gets worse. And so then when all of this blew open in October, I just thought, oh my God, all of our spouses out there, or all of our, my wife was not really a part of IHOP much, and really never got it. Didn't understand it. So in October, she kind of looks at me, and I'm like, you have no idea what this means. And anyway, just a memory I have.
That's so funny.
What was your first impression? Did you notice that whenever?
I actually didn't. I do not feel like, I guess you were careful not to talk about it, because I do not remember you guys talking about IHOP in a like super intense way, or even you talking to me about it in a super traumatic way. It was like barely talked about. It was like avoided.
I didn't want to ever
think.
talk about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I knew you went there, but it wasn't like, we didn't ever go super deep about that. I feel like I was more like caught off guard by all of the next phase of all of the like whack stuff. I was like, what's going on here?
The grace.
So that's what really had my attention there, because that was more recent. But then I think as the longer we were married, the more you started to open up about it and talk about it more.
2015, the blog, wrote that big blog.
Right.
You helped me kind of process that.
True. Yeah. You were like nervous about writing the blog, and I was just like, why that this happened to you? This is your story. What's the problem here? Just, yeah. I think that's when we first talked about it. Yeah.
That's when we really talked about it. And I was shaking writing that blog, and I didn't know what was going on with me. It was like, it was basically stuffed for two and a half years. And I finally was like, I'm going to talk about this. And I did it in a way that was so like honest, but also like overly nice, you know? But Christina was like, well, what's the big deal? You're being so nice to these people. I'm like, cause I think internally I was still scared. I was still scared. The spiritual authority teaching, you know, all of that, touch the Lord's anointed, all that stuff, you know? And then always this underlying feeling, what about the prophetic history? You know, which leads us to here. So talk to us, Austin, because you initially started posting in 2013, questioning the prophetic history. And bro, you started a storm on Facebook that lasted for about 2-3 months. And so tell us, I guess, give us the history. Your parents were in Kansas City. You, I think if I remember correctly, you walked into the night watch at 18 years old after kind of going through a season of doing drugs and kind of living, partying and stuff. And you walked into the night watch and got saved, and then ended up becoming an intern, getting on staff. And then, so walk us through that, and then to your leaving IHOP, and let's go from there.
Yeah. So, the short version is my parents were part of this young adult church with Mike in the early 80s. And so that would have been South Kansas City Fellowship, which later became Metro Vineyard Fellowship once they joined the Vineyard churches, the Wimber, and then split off from there, became Metro Christian Fellowship. And then Mike left that to start IHOP. And so my parents were in their early 20s with Mike and all of them during all of these famous stories of the prophetic history. And we'll get into more, I think, defining what that is for people. But they were there through all of these meetings and events when all these stories are being told. And then they started having a family and really decided to branch off from being really involved in the ministry, which was kind of an idea for them, and to just being attending the church. So we grew up going to Mike's churches and involved in the youth group a little bit. But I mean, I remember hearing the names Bob Jones, Paul Cain. That's when my parents were around. So they were around with those guys. And then when my memory really begins, I actually don't remember those guys, but I remember Michael Sullivan, Joe Austin, Sean Bowles was actually around. He went to the church for a while.
Sean Bowles, the prophetic guy that talks about Jeffrey Epstein on the YouTube and politics.
I think so. He's like an itinerant prophetic minister or so.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And so these are just people at church that you see on Sunday, and then Mike left the church, brought in Floyd McClung from YWAM. Floyd becomes the pastor, and then Mike goes to start IHOP. So that's 99, and then they put these trailers together, build the first prayer room, and then our mom is a singer on one of those early teams. So these are these early worship teams. They're trying to fill the schedule at IHOP. So we're talking Monty Poe, Pablo Perez, really young Misty Edwards. I'm probably like 13, 14, 15 at this time. And so our mom would bring some of us kids. We'd sit in there, and then she would do a set with whatever team she was singing with. And then skip ahead a few years. Yeah, I'm about to turn 18, and I'm just in that neighborhood actually in the middle of the night, and go up to IHOP in the middle of the night, and I have a moment where I walk in, and had never been up there to this new building, this was at the Redbridge Center now, in the middle of the night. And I mean, I didn't know this thing was happening in the middle of the night. And so I was blown away. Walked in there, see all these people, see all these interns. I mean, a bunch of young people walking around, because they're just pacing back and forth, And
Yeah.
that really strikes you when you've never seen them before.
Does. You're like,
Number
am I
one,
at a church group right now? Why is everybody walking? Is this like they get their
just
steps in?
some of them are cruising, And
I mean,
just
Christina
like,
tries to go for the 10,000 steps every day with her watch. She would love IHOP.
and this was before the steps, before the watches. But people are like, getting their steps in, they're cruising. But I remember it struck me, and it really, I couldn't let it go. I just thought either these people are all insane, mentally ill, or
Keep going.
or this has something to do with God. And my brain just went there. I just thought, this is so unusual that either God has something to do with this, or this is really off. This is really, really unusual. I knew that I knew why I was awake, but I didn't understand why these people were awake.
You're like, I'm not mentally ill, and it could be God.
Yeah.
I don't know, or maybe it's a mix of both. Who knows? Maybe we all were a little mix of both. I don't know.
Yeah, no doubt, and no doubt, staying awake all night will make you a mix.
True.
But yeah, I opened my mind to the idea of God being real, and I really hadn't until then, and so I had a conversion, and I became a Christian that week. It was probably within that week, and immediately, this is during the daytime, not during the nighttime, but immediately I get honed in on by Misty Edwards. She walks off the stage. She's doing her music, walks off the stage right up to me in the prayer room, and hands me all this stuff, all these books and all this stuff, and starts prophesying to me, and completely recruits me. I mean, in 60 seconds, says, you are meant to be here all the days of your life.
Wow.
And gives me the Bible verses, gives me the prophecies. I can see, like, this is the star of the show. Has come and found me, and I just converted. I just became a Christian, and that day or the day before or something. It was just, and so it was just it seemed like such a powerful moment. It really just seemed like, wow, this must be God telling me, giving me some details for what I'm supposed to do. Because that's kind of what's in your mind in this conversion is, okay, I'm giving my life to you, God. I'm 18 years old. Now, what do I do? I want to do something for you now, but what do I do? And all of a sudden, she's just telling me, like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be here at IHOP. She actually told me that she remembered me from the trailer days. And she said, I remember you as a child in the trailers. And so this is the calling of God. You're supposed to be here all the days of your life. And I remember that just went into my mind, deep into my mind. I mean, deep into my heart. And I held on to that. I'm going to be here all the days of my life. And and that's what I planned on doing. Um, and then kind of skipping to the end here because I spent a little more time on that than I planned, but uh, then did the internship, a 6-month internship, 2006. Went on full time staff, did full time staff till 2012. In 2012, you, me, and another friend kind of got joined together and got in trouble and kind of threatened to toe the line or get the boot. And I knew why it was happening to you guys was theological, and I knew that it was happening to me because of the prophetic history. I was asking some theological questions, but mostly I was bringing up discrepancies that I had noticed with different leaders, and so I knew my name was getting around. I
Now,
knew your guys
Austin,
were getting
I gotta
around.
I gotta
Yeah,
ask you this question because during that
yeah,
time, and just for context for everyone, so I came in the night watch in 2008. I met Austin immediately in 2008. You had been there for already 2 years, right? In the night watch ish.
yeah. Hmm.
And
Yeah, 2 or
so,
3 years.
so I met you. We became pretty much instant friends. We went on the justice trip together to Amsterdam. I was like in the
Yeah,
justice program leader thing, and we went there um,
yeah.
and I
2009, and the
yeah,
Awakening was a couple
the
months later. Yep.
awakening in November 2009. Then 2012, our buddy brought us a book that he was being impacted by that was completely opposite theologically than IHOP Kansas City, and definitely threw me off the rails a little bit. And then you didn't so much embrace that, but you were more so. I knew you were questioning the prophetic history because of your Facebook posts at a certain time, but I didn't know that like that 6 hour meeting that we had, the infamous 6 hour meeting where we got called in. I was no longer on staff. I was at a different church. You had left, and our buddy had pretty much left by that time too. We were all doing our own things by that time. I had a different job. They still were pulling us into these meetings. They pulled us into that nighttime meeting. That 6 hour meeting, did you ask prophetic history questions during that? I remember such a long, drawn out meeting about theological things, but was that already happening at that time, or was the prophetic history later with you and Stuart and Dave Sliker and these different leaders?
Yeah, I was asking questions behind the scenes before that, but by the time that meeting came,
To who? Like what? Like mid level leaders or like top leaders or?
yeah, all of them. I mean, it started with my worship team, and there are a couple people I don't want to throw under the bus, but
Sure.
but it started with my worship team. I asked some
Just give us
questions in the middle.
initials. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Hair color.
It rhymes with no. Uh, yeah, I just started asking questions, and I mean, immediately I get kicked off of a worship team.
I
I
remember
mean,
that. I
that
remember
week,
that now. Wow, I remember that.
and I was like, what is happening? I mean, all I'm doing is asking questions. Like, everybody knows me here. I mean, I'm as dedicated a cult member as you're gonna get. So there's
Did you
no,
use that language? That's probably not even. I'm the most dedicated out of all of you cult members.
yeah. I mean, at that time, I was planning on my career is going to be I'm going to start a house of prayer and lead one somewhere,
Yeah.
and that's all. This is in training for that. I'll direct a house of prayer, and this is my plan. But I'm just asking questions about things I can see that are off. And the only reason I can see that they're off is because I'm studying the prophetic history, all of the recordings, all of the accounts. I'm just comparing them, and I start noticing these changes. So I start asking about these changes, like but innocently. I'm not thinking that there's a problem at first. I'm thinking, um, what is the, somebody made a mistake, what is the actual version? So I just start asking
For
around.
example, Mike says in 1984 something, he tells a story the first time, then in 89 he tells the story again, it's a little different, and then he tells a story in 95. That's what you mean by the different versions. By the time 2010 comes around, we're all hearing a certain thing, and you're saying
Yeah.
you're studying the old versions and asking, why is this different? Which one's true?
Yeah. Or even, why would you say it this way when you could say it this way and it would be more forthright, and there would be no room for someone to think you're being misleading.
Hmm.
And I just, people are just telling me, either they don't know, or they're telling me, go ask someone else. Um, or they're saying, go ask Mike. And so it ended with me going and trying to talk to Mike. And this is all just, on my own time, behind the scenes. I'm not trying to cause a problem. I'm trying to become the most knowledgeable person as it relates to this stuff, because I think it's that important. My feeling was, if this is real, then I need to know what I'm dealing with, and I need to be precise about it. I mean, if angels are really being sent by God, if Gabriel is really coming, if Jesus Christ is really appearing, I want to know the real version of it. And but it was the reaction of people to my questions that were the immediate red flags. I had had a couple small red flags previously, but I had really assigned those to individuals and said, that's an individual problem that this person has, a management problem or a personal issue. And I wasn't really looking at it like a structural issue. I wasn't looking at it as a common thread that you couldn't ask, that you couldn't challenge the narrative. But I immediately was realizing, oh, I'm in a place where you really can't challenge the narrative. So by the time we had that long meeting with Dave and Stuart, um, my feeling was just, I'm not going to get anywhere with them, and so I'm not going to waste my time.
Hmm. Interesting. And see, I didn't know that all those meetings were happening, even being a really close friend.
Dave was meeting with most people.
Yeah.
Did you ever end up meeting with Mike about it?
Well, I didn't meet with them, but I just grabbed him and said, "Hey, can I ask you a couple questions?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." And then we went into a side room. This is just in the morning when he came in after the night watch, but grabbed a side room. Hey, I have some questions about this and that. And he just said, his response is just like really giddy and excited, and uh, what's the word? Like you would treat a kid.
Like, it's
Uh,
really cool that you're studying this much and you're like really excited about this stuff, kind of treating you like that.
yeah, just like somebody that is just joyful about seeing a curious child asking a question about a bug or something. You just think it's cute and cool, and he's kind of just grinning and giddy, and, oh yeah, I love that you're asking this. This is great. But and then he just ends like, yeah, but I don't have time. Like, I have to get in the prayer room. But like, keep up the good work, buddy. And I had a number of those kind of exchanges over the years, and the reasoning was always, Mike's just trying to have his prayer room time. Like, he's got all his time scheduled, so don't mess with his schedule. And if you really need a meeting with him, you're going to get it scheduled. And so I've had some scheduled meetings with Mike also, but regarding the prophetic history, that's all I ever got from him. And but it was enough. And so by the time we were by the time we were there, and getting told to toe the line, or get the boot, I realized I was not going to get anywhere because people were, and I could relate to it, people were so invested in our reality that it was too risky to try to pull back that curtain. There's
Yeah.
too much to lose.
It's
And
your
just
whole
like,
life. It's your whole future.
yeah.
It's kind of like what you said, Austin. You said my plan was to start a house of prayer somewhere. So if this is real, then it's worth me being absolutely precise, knowing everything like the back of my hand. I had that same feeling first time I listened to Prophetic History in 2004. I was in East Texas full time at another ministry, and I went, "This is mind blowing," and it captured me. It captured my mind for the next 4 years until I moved to Kansas City, and to where I studied.
Wow.
I would listen to it over and over, and I'd memorize these stories. No disease known to men, the billion soul harvest, the end time apostles, the chariot. So when I'm hearing Jane Doe, the original Jane Doe that came out with her story publicly to the Royce Report first about Paris and all that stuff, I'm hearing her talk about Mike prophesying that she was going to be in the chariot with him, and I went, what? Like, it's like, it's pretty shaking, man. It's pretty startling. Talk to us. Go ahead and let's dive into some of these prophetic words and the prophetic history. And unless Christina, you have a question on anything Austin said so far, we could just dive in and start going through the things that you started. Maybe even those things. I know you got a list of them that you gave us, but talk about the things that impacted you the most when you first started uncovering them. What were you asking people? What were you uncovering?
Or maybe before you do that part.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Maybe this might be a very loaded question, but
Go for it.
Possible, give like a brief overview for somebody who's following the IHOP stuff, but they didn't go there for 20 years and they don't know what the prophetic history is. And when people say the prophetic history, they're like, what are you talking about?
Good question.
Yeah.
See if you can do a 60-second to a 2-minute
elevator
kind of
pitch of the prophetic history.
Starts with Bob Jones and it ends with Jesus coming back because we
or just like what it is, why it's important, why it's taught so much. I didn't even hear what you said.
I said it starts with Bob Jones, it ends with Jesus coming back, and it all happens because we yelled all day into a mic in Kansas City. Don't forget the bread basket. The bread basket of the USA. Dude, there's so many things.
See, because I don't know what you guys are talking about. So if you did like a brief overview of what it is, why it's important, why you guys studied it so much, and why it was like you needed to know all the details to start your own prayer ministry. Like, what is it?
Great question.
Yeah, that's good. So, yeah, if you're not there, the easiest way of understanding what the prophetic history is it was actually just supposedly a bunch of events that happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So basically over 4 decades, it was events. And then as time went on, it became the history only because time was going on. So at the time, they didn't think this is the prophetic history. They thought that they were getting prophecies that were going to be fulfilled immediately. And when things didn't happen immediately or in 5 years or in 10 years, then Mike reframed everything as a history. So this is our history. This is where we've been. But he also started introducing a phrase that is less used, but I noticed Mike was trying to introduce it into the lingo, but the prophetic destiny. And prophetic history caught on way more, so he just kind of used that. But the concept is actually the same, the prophetic history and the prophetic destiny. So this is where we've been, and this is where we're going.
Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Insurance. We help clients all over the nation with their term life, whole life, or universal life insurance, and we're definitely happy to help you with a consultation.
Check the description below for more info.
And these are stories that are these are stories that are claims of visions, visits to heaven, angels coming out of heaven and visiting different leaders at the early days of the ministry. We're talking about the 80s and the 90s. Stories of Mike having Jesus appear to him, stories of Mike going to heaven, stories of Mike having the angel Gabriel come. And so, why is this all important? Well, it's really not important if this is just a Christian ministry or a church, but it is important if this is something totally different. It's important if what this group is doing is unique from a church or unique from a normal Christian ministry. And that is the main claim, that the unique thing that this group would be doing would be triggering the second coming of Christ at the end of time. And in order to do that, everybody at IHOP would have to keep doing IHOP for decades. And the only way we're going to be doing IHOP for decades, because doing IHOP means working for free, is if we believe that we're not just working for free, but we're working because the angel Gabriel came and the comet came and Mike rode on a chariot and Mike went to heaven. And therefore, every day when I look at my bank account and it's overdrafted, I have, instead of being totally depressed, I have some kind of chemical, I still have some kind of chemicals from the prophetic history keeping me going. And Mike actually describes when he introduces the prophetic history, because the prophetic history is 12 CDs. While I was there, for those 7 years, it was required listening, these 12 CDs. It was a little over 12 hours. And every single intern had to listen to these when they came through. So they come through for 3 months. They're going to listen to these stories right when they get there. And us leaders listen to them with them when they arrive. So every single intern is going through the 12 hours the first week they arrive at IHOP. And this is at least happening while I was there for those 7 years. And people who were there longer will have a better idea of how long they actually were required. I know they stopped being required after the five guys went in and had this meeting and this mediation time. One of the things Mike responded with is he said, we're not going to require the prophetic history to be listened to. But it was required. And so then those of us who are leaders are listening to it every 3 months, at least once every 3 months, this 12 hours. Then Mike is also telling these stories at every single monthly staff meeting. The stories are also being told at most monthly worship team meetings. And then, and this is the hilarious part, we have Friday night services, Saturday night services, and Sunday morning services. And in those meetings, it's just Bible. So there's a little bit of stuff here and there, but it's mostly just Bible. Sermon
But
on
if
the
you
Mount.
look at his Bible,
And
in his notes, he always had, there would always be a point, there would always be a paragraph. And this is from, he'd be preaching on John 17, and then he'd be like, 1982, Bob Jones talked to me March 2nd, 1982, and all of a sudden go into a story, which would relate to somehow John 17. Then he would keep going. It was, but it's interesting the way you're saying it. I'm going, you're right. Every worship team meeting I was in, pretty much anything that we were doing, they would somehow find every leader, including yourself, myself, everybody that was a mid-level leader. It was indoctrinated into us to where we would suddenly relate something to the prophetic history, some important thing from the Bible. We'd relate it to the prophetic history, which means that what we're doing here matters so significantly. Even if you hate it, if you're bored out of your mind, if you're broke, it matters so significantly that you'll stay here for another, 6 months and do it again, because those stories are just going over and over. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can help me, Christina. Is that clear at all, or is there any?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense, I think.
Yeah, so
Okay.
just think of it
So
like
yeah,
this: from 1982 or early 70s, these stories of Mike or Bob or everything related to Mike. Though at the end of the day, it all would come back to Mike's destiny. People giving Mike prophetic words over a 40-year period, over a 30-year period, that he would lead a youth movement that would pray for Israel, that would get them saved, and that would lead to the second coming of Jesus. So that's one reason why when people say, "Why do they keep bringing up Israel?" Whatever you believe about Israel and the end times, whatever you believe about any of that, just know that the reason that right now Isaac Bennett, who's the current leader of IHOP, brings up Israel all the time because he's like, you know what? Who cares? He doesn't say these words, so don't say I'm quoting him. But here's the impression that it gives off. Who cares what's happened? Who cares what Mike did? Like, yes, Mike's a bad guy. He did this, that, and the other. But these prophetic stories are true. And regardless of how bad what we've done or where it's been, or we still have a destiny that's going to lead to Israel's salvation and to Jesus coming back. So we will not give up on that destiny. But the problem that he's not addressing is, how do you even know that all these stories are true when the guy that's been saying them for 40 years has been lying about multiple sexual abuse situations and all these women? And so that comes down to all the different versions, which is why it's so important what you started to do back in 2012 in asking these questions. So let's dive into.
I have one more question.
Go ahead.
So as I'm understanding it, as you're saying it, I think the biggest thing that you said that helps make sense of it all is the point of it kind of is for it to be so important and so significant and so impactful that it is enough to keep people there. Basically, keep people going there, keep people, the 24/7 prayer going.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
yeah. I think about it like it's the carrot and the stick. Like this is what we're chasing after. We're being told you're working for free now, but you're going to be paid a living wage. The billionaires are coming to fund the prayer movement. And I mean, I was told
It's
this on
prophecy too.
multiple occasions. Yeah, it's in the prophetic history. And I was told this on multiple occasions by the CFO, who I became friends with during my time. And I would always say, like, hey, is there money coming or what? Like, what's happening? and he's like, oh, yeah, the Mike's always meeting with millionaires, billionaires, and the money's coming, and these plans are in place for everybody to get a living wage, and um, and then a lot of people are singers and musicians, so we're being told like the stadiums are going to be filled, and you're going to be you may be a singer or a musician on the stage in the stadium when these prophecies are fulfilled and no one is sleeping for 3 days and the dead are being raised up and people are having miracles by the thousands or by the 10,000s. And in these stories there's going to be all of these singers and musicians who don't need to sleep, they don't need to change their clothes, they don't need to eat, and somehow they're just supernaturally playing music for 3 days.
Wait,
And
playing the same chord progression for 3 days?
at Arrowhead Stadium.
1, 5, 6 minor 4 for
They're
3 days. Sorry.
just holding that minor for 3 days.
6, 5, 4, 1. End on a high
That
note.
minor six.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, so there's always, or let's say if you think, well, I'm not a messenger. Well, there's a prophecy for everyone. So oh, I'm not a musician, I'm a messenger, I'm a preacher. Oh, well, we've got a
You'll
prophecy
be
for you.
preaching too.
The apostles are coming. The apostles are coming back, and Mike is one, and there's 35 more though. So that's plenty. That's plenty of apostles for. So
But the
in all
stadium,
these stories,
yeah, go ahead, keep going.
yeah, and I'll just say, in all these stories, you are inserting yourself as the person fulfilling the story. So Mike is kind of the initial fulfillment or the initial central person in all these stories, but then you, whoever you are the next fulfillment of that. So you can insert yourself in this story, and that becomes your destiny. That becomes your future planned for you. And it's exciting, and it's kind of
And
unbelievable.
when people would leave or fall off the wagon, you'd be like, man, they couldn't hack it. They couldn't do it. And I guess,
They weren't
Bring out
called, or they
destiny.
weren't faithful.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're a second
They
class
missed the
citizen in the
destiny.
kingdom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not, yeah, not called to the greater things or whatever. I mean, there's definitely this feeling of elitism. No matter how much Mike would say from stage or different speakers, like, we're not the elite, there's no elitism. It doesn't matter what you're saying. It's the undercurrent of the prophetic history gives you that feeling of, I'm sticking it out, I'm staying, I'm the most dedicated. And there's definitely that feeling all the time of, we're kind of all set apart for the idea of the forerunner, all that stuff. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And the idea is that if you didn't have the prophetic history, you wouldn't have IHOP and you wouldn't be doing IHOP. That
Right.
was very basic understanding when I got there and all through the years. Later on, they started bringing in more and more. Oh, well, it's all throughout the Bible anyway, so we would be
Yeah.
doing IHOP without with or without all the
Well, that's what
prophetic
I was going to
history.
ask you is I noticed
Yeah,
that one of the biggest things that I would hear all the time would be anytime that the prophetic history started to get questioned or overemphasized, be like, well, Jesus is worthy. And you saw that after Mike was exposed, people were posting about like Jesus is worthy of night and day worship. Jesus is worthy of 24/7. It's like, no. You guys would not be doing it. If you just take a basic reading of the Bible, it does not lead you to 24/7 uh, worship sessions, like night and day worship sessions. Like Romans 12 says, offer your body as a living sacrifice. Thessalonians says, live a quiet life and work with your hands. There's so many things that lead to a regular expression, not necessarily this idea of, and maybe, I don't know, this, you told me one time in the last couple months when we were talking about this, you said, I think these abuses happen not in spite of 24/7 prayer, but because of 24/7 prayer. You remember that? Talk about that. Like, why do you think that led to these situations?
but I think the reason they went on without being discerned. So not that the cause of the abuse uh, is the 24/7 thing, but the reason they go on, the abuse goes on for all of these decades without being discerned or recognized, I think is actually the environment of the 24/7 prayer and worship. Um, that's an important question that people are asking, I'm sure, is how did people not figure this out? And and I think that environment is a huge factor. In this case, the way I would say it is probably like you can have too much of a good thing. And so a little bit of prayer, a little bit of singing, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of Bible study. But Mike's whole thing was just 10x or 100x or 1000x, all of these things. You know, um, don't just skip a meal, do a 40-day fast every year
Once a
and do a
year.
fast every quarter and do a 3-day fast every month and do a 1-day fast every week. That's what we did.
That's actually the schedule. Yeah.
Crazy.
It's like
Yeah.
basically you eat like 5 days out of the year.
Yeah, I mean, we're some hungry people. So if you're going to try to get away with stuff, and I'll just add, if you're going to try to control people, keeping them hungry is really effective.
Mm.
Meditation, keeping them really focused in these loop like thinking patterns really effective. Keeping them emotionally stimulated and then overwhelmed is really effective. Loud music, loud, pulsating, blasting music, and we have to be in there 6 hours a day. I mean, that's our commitment. We signed a paper, 6 hours a day minimum, and we're in these. I don't know what the decibels were. I can't remember right now, but we're in this loud music, this kind of crazy environment when you think about that you're trying to focus on something. But there's a lot of emotional experiences happening in that, because of the music. So you get the right set, you get the right music, you get the right song, and you can have a really emotional experience, and which makes you vulnerable, and it makes you open and impressionable to the information and the symbols that are being given to you.
Because they're also being sung through the music. And that's one of the biggest things is the repetitive singing of a chorus that's not always a Bible verse, because there's a lot of Bible verses sung at IHOP. Like there was a lot of Bible verses, but there was also a lot of theology sung at IHOP, and it was usually just
and the prophetic history.
And the prophetic history, no disease, no man. Yeah, you just start hearing
tons of songs and choruses and lines were just straight out of the prophetic history, and of course we all thought it was awesome.
Yeah, we did. CDs were made, albums were made. It's hilarious. We're talking about CDs. We're like CDs. We sound like people saying 8 tracks. I won't give any generational words, but yeah,
signals.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, man.
Yeah. So all of those things, in my view, contribute to people being manipulated, being controlled, and the ability to overlook abuse or not notice abuse because of the state of mind that you're in.
You're right.
And I think a lot of experiences that people had that they refer to as spiritual experiences were physiological, chemical, psychological experiences that resulted from this environment, being hungry, being tired, being stressed, and then also
wanting the experience, wanting it really, really bad because it's talked about so much. Yeah.
And being hit with these really extreme emotions on the other end of hope and joy and expectation, and kind of bouncing back and forth between these. And this all, in my view, just helps this stuff go on and go overlooked. And there's more to that, but I think probably for another day. I'll just say to cap it off, I think it contributes to the disassembly of the conscience. People have a conscience is supposed to help you discern right and wrong, or if something is going wrong, the ability to trust your gut. And that is a classic result of these high control groups, these cults, that the combination of these factors in this environment disassemble that ability of your gut to be aware. So that alarm system that's supposed to be going off when things are off gets broken down until it's just offline. And I think that's one of the things that happens there as you're there over time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So talk to us, Austin, about top 7 prophecies of the prophetic history, and just give us them point by point.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure we have no time to really spend on all this, but I think people are
No, I think people are going to engage. I think people engage.
I think so too,
Yeah.
because I like have no
Okay.
idea about them. So anytime you guys talk about them, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. I think it's worth
People
talking
can
about.
fast forward to the parts they want to watch, or people will engage, man. This is some depth here. I mean, and this for people that have been around IHOP for a long time or left after 2, 3, 5, 10 years. This stuff is helpful and healing. You know, you were there for 7 years. I was there for 4.5 years. Hearing the breakdown and hearing us talk through it, I think is really, really helpful. So I'm not afraid of a longer podcast here today.
Okay, cool. Well, buckle your seatbelts then.
Oh wait, I mean, I didn't mean that. Like, actually, we gotta go.
That's not that long. Do you have 12 hours? Because there's 12 CDs.
12.5 minutes. Let's go. Let's break it down. Let's do, dude. I have an idea. It's a great business model here, Austin. Let's do 12 CDs. You break down each one and why each one was wrong, and you can sell it on IHOPKC-Austin.org. Kidding. I shouldn't have said that live. Somebody else is going to take the idea.
Yeah. I know. I always told Angela, I'm like, I can't wait till Blaise is a dad because he's had this dad humor for so long, but there's nobody to appreciate it.
Now the whole world gets to appreciate it.
Well, I'm thinking of your kids.
One reason why I married Christina is because she laughs at my jokes. She laughed at my dad jokes while we were dating and engaged. I was like, this is incredible.
I remember that too, actually, that I was like, okay, she thinks this is cute, which is nice.
That's a good
He
sign.
thinks she thinks that this guy is funny. She's the one.
Put a ring on that, bro.
I gotta stop. Keep going. Yeah,
it's getting late. Yeah,
we decided
what I wrote was what I wrote was the top 7 prophecies of the prophetic history, and what I would suggest people do is just go do research and look into these things, because it's obvious to me that these things have not really been scrutinized well, and I haven't scrutinized everything to a certain level of to the depth that's needed. So, but what I did is I just wrote down. There's a lot of prophecies, but I wrote down what I think are the top 7, and these are what I think of as the top 7 during the time that I was there. So 2000 and really I got there at the end of 2005 to 2012. But if you look at 2005 to 2013 kind of time range is what I was really aware of what was going on in the community. And I think these were the 7 most significant or known prophecies of the prophetic history in the community during that time frame. Number 1 probably would be, this is just my list, would be the white horse prophecy. That's a Bob Jones prophecy. I'll just go through the list first. Number 2, the stadium prophecy from Paul Cain. Number 3, the no disease prophecy from Bob Jones. Number 4, the end time apostles prophecy from Bob Jones and Mike Bickle, because that kind of has 2 parts to it. The billion souls prophecy from Bob Jones, his near-death experience that he gives the account of. Number 6, the blueprint prophecy and the black horse prophecy, which are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. And then and that was from Carl Autry, now we know, and Augustine Alcala. And then number 7, the Jesus in red and the turn word prophecies, which were from Mike Bickle and Shelley Hunley. And in my mind, these are the ones at the top of the list for during those years. And actually the Luke 4:18 one, which we'll get to later, was a big one also, because that ties into several of these and and had to do with Paul Cain and Mike Bickle, and it became this whole thing also. So yeah, I don't know.
Let's do this. Give a 60-second overview of each one. So the white horse prophecy from Bob Jones. What is that?
Yeah, so the White Horse prophecy from Bob Jones was a prophecy that goes all the way back to the early 80s. And in this original prophecy, Bob Jones is telling Mike Bickle that God is going to have a movement, and it's going to be an end time movement. And it was pictured to Bob in a vision as a white horse. And that white horse had a board with a guy on top of the board. And at a certain point in time in this prophecy, the guy on the board would get up and be healed from laying on the board. And when that happened, the water that is, the white horse is standing in this river, the water would rise, and that represented that God's power would come around and upon this white horse. And the meaning of it was supposed to be Mike Bickle's brother Pat had this accident when they were in high school and had broken his neck and was paralyzed since he was in high school. And so this prophecy was saying that the guy on the board was Pat Bickle, Mike's brother, and that at a certain time he would be healed miraculously. And then at that time, there would be basically a Christian revival. And all these other people would be converted and miracles would occur. And that would be the white horse prophecy being fulfilled.
Pat Bickle died. Sadly, Pat Bickle died, right?
Yeah, so they just dragged Pat Bickle around to all these meetings for years. I mean, we would just see them wheeling him in and out, and then he passed away, and so they just chopped that part out of the story and kept the rest of it.
They kept the prophecy but took out him being a part of it and the one that was going to be healed, but they still kept that.
They just completely took out the guy on the board and just left the horse there.
I never heard the guy on the board. I never heard it that way.
It was
2004 is the first thing I heard. Never heard it. Never heard that in that prophecy ever in the 16 hours.
Yeah, it was gone by the 2002 version. Yeah.
That part is so crazy to me. It's hard for me because part of me feels like, okay, all of this is fake. They made everything up. It's all lies. For this bigger purpose, for them to create this thing. But then when you say he drug his brother around from meeting to meeting to meeting, that means that he believed it, right? That means he believed it. He thought it was real. You know what I mean? That's the part where it like makes me wonder like where his head was at during all this. 'Cause
it's a great point.
Right?
Or a great question. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's something that we can answer, except because there's so much in everything that feels like everything was set up almost to create an environment where he could have abuse opportunities left and right. Then again, you go, okay, did he go that far to do that, or was he taking the brother to really believe?
Well, you're not going to drag your brother all around, but even if you are, that doesn't make sense because the whole point is that he's going to be healed. And if you know that's never going to happen,
then you're not going
to keep doing that, making everybody see him going to all these meetings, being prayed for and not being healed. That like doesn't help your cause. It's worse
for the cause. That makes sense.
So that's the part that's harder for me.
Well, I would say it's actually not worse though, because the success of this cause is not actually in the healing. Like the success of IHOP is not actually the prophecies being fulfilled. It never was. And it's always the future thing that keeps it going. So it's not even the fulfillment. It's just the promise actually that keeps everything going. So actually it's really effective bringing these people around. Like we had a number of other people who we became friends with at IHOP or on the night watch or during the day, who were critically ill or chronically ill, and they would go to the meetings or we would go to their houses or whatever. And if they were all just immediately healed, we would have just moved on and found other people, because that was part of this thing driving us forward, is this mission of, these
Eventually, this will happen.
conversions and these miracles. Yeah. So having him at every meeting actually was, it was very useful for the cause.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the way everything was framed is, if you hang in there and wait for the fulfillment for 5 years, and then after 5 years say, this doesn't seem to be happening, I'm out of here. When you leave, Mike and everybody else just says, well, they didn't hang in there. I mean, they just would not persevere until the promise came. And so why isn't Pat Bickle or these other people getting healed? Must be not enough faith, not enough fasting, not enough prayer, not enough, but it's still coming. And then once it doesn't come, once they die instead of get healed, you just cut that out of the story. And in 5 years, it's a whole new group of people. They never knew it was in the story in the first place.
That's exactly right. See, that's the point I was thinking, is it's almost like built to this thing where after 2, 3, really that 5-year mark, it sounds like you've got this whole new crew of people. I mean, I feel like I stayed there for a long time, and I was just around the 5-year mark. And I think that, and I was a pretty dedicated person. So I think you have these interns that come in for 1 year on average. Really 6 months is like a long time for an intern unless they get on staff. And so you got this 1 year tenure, and then they're gone. Then a new group of people, so you just change the stories. Talk about the stadium prophecy from Paul Cain.
Yeah, so the stadium prophecy, number 2 here on the list, is Paul Cain. When he came to IHOP, I don't have time to do his background, but when he came to IHOP, which was Mike's church at the time, he told Mike, I know I'm supposed to be here because I've had this vision. He said he had it 100 times, and he knew this was the people who were going to be in this stadium vision. And the stadium vision was that all of the football stadiums, or the sports stadiums, all over the world, certainly around the country, would be filled up with these intercessors and these singers, and all these miracles would be taking place, and the dead would be raised up and resurrected, and the sick would be healed, and the sinner would be converted, and this would be happening in the sports stadiums all over the world. And he said in the vision he saw a newscaster, like a newsreel playing, and the newscaster saying, there's no news but good news tonight. All over the world, these Christians are filling the stadiums, and over there the dead is raised, over there the sick is healed. So that was a huge prophecy and promise that we all expected to happen in our lifetime.
Yeah. No Disease Known to Man prophecy by Bob Jones.
Yeah, so that prophecy was there's a backstory to it, but the bottom line is that a promise that there would be so much supernatural healing at IHOP that hundreds of thousands of people would be flooding into Kansas City, be rushing to come to IHOP, because at a certain point in time, every single person that would come to IHOP would be supernaturally healed of whatever sickness they had or ailment or disease, and that no disease known to man, that was the phrase, would stand before this people. And so that anybody, kind of like the story of the shadow of I think it's the shadow of Peter and the handkerchief of Paul are healing people in the Bible, that this kind of miraculous power would be occurring.
Gotcha. End time apostles prophecy.
Yeah, so that's a mixture of Bob Jones and Paul Kane, and basically it comes from Mike claiming he went to heaven, and then Paul claiming, or Bob claiming that he also went to heaven somehow, or had an experience. And they both say that God showed them that, you had the 12 apostles in the Bible, and now you're going to have the 35 apostles. It's just such a funny number.
Is random.
Now you're going to have the 35 apostles. So you have the 12 apostles in Jerusalem in first century AD. And now you're going to have the 35 apostles in Kansas City in the 2020s or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be the real deal. And these guys are going to be having all this other stuff happening, the miracles and the healings and so on and so forth, but plus a bunch of other things. Like they're going to be confronting political figures in the government and causing controversy in the stock market and in other spheres of,
because of their prophecies, like things like that. They would show up and they'd show up and cause problems, turn the world upside down, basically, before the return of Christ at the end, before the Antichrist rises, type of thing. And these 35 from Mike Bickle, where he saw that they were getting in chariots in heaven, and each one that got in a chariot, they say, "No, I'm not worthy." And then the Lord told him, "Get in a chariot." And he was like, "No, I'm not worthy." And everybody would hear this would be like, "Oh, wow, he's so humble. He's so humble." Yeah.
I remember being at IHOP, and I was talking to somebody about these verses and how do you define, a prophet and an apostle and everything like that. And I'm like, so is this person? I'm asking this individual. I'm like, so is this person a prophet? And they were like, no, they're not a prophet. They're a teacher, and this other person's a prophet. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess that kind of makes sense. And I'm like, so what is Mike? And they said, well, Mike's an apostle. This is right when I got there. They said, well, Mike's an apostle. And I'm like, an apostle? I'm like an apostle? And they're, I've never heard this kind of terminology used for people. And I know it's used in various denominations. Yeah, but I was thinking like the 12 apostles, which is also what Mike is thinking. And they said, oh yeah, Mike Bickle's an apostle. Haven't you heard the chariot story where he went to heaven and God said, these are the apostles, and Mike is going to be one of them. So that kind of wraps, that's kind of that in a nutshell, the end time apostles. Mike never comes out and says, I'm an apostle. And he would even say things like, I'm not saying I'm an apostle. But he does this kind of double speak constantly, where he'll say, I'm not telling you that I'm an apostle, and I'm not telling you that people are going to be apostles like the 12 in the Bible. But I'm just telling you that I was told to get in this chariot.
Yeah.
And everyone that gets in the chariot are apostles. But I'm not telling you I'm an apostle.
Make your own conclusion.
So whenever you guys were there, were you guys thinking that you guys were going to be apostles? Was that like in your head? I mean, is that the idea that like you would be an apostle?
I was hoping for it for about a year, maybe.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to laugh. I'm sorry, but
I was really.
Who did you think?
I mean, I heard.
Honest.
I am. I'm trying to. I'm working hard at it right now. No, I'm listening. I'm thinking. I'm really thinking about this, and I'm going. back then, I remember hearing these stories and I was like, wow, 35 young people got into chariots. And like, honestly, I think what I thought was like, I think it's too late. I think probably all the 35 already got in, but maybe I'll be a prophet. I think that's what I really
How
thought.
many prophets were there going to be? Endless?
Billions. 144,000
Unlimited.
actually, according to the book of Revelation. And I had been keeping track. We were 143,989. So I was like, I got like 11 more. I can do this as long as I have the right dream or the right prophetic word for somebody. No, I do think that there was definitely, you hear it the first time, you're like, wow, this is why I've always felt this, this call, this thing or whatever. But then you're like, 35, I don't know that I'm going to be in that, but gosh, God is raising up people in these days to confront systems and speak his word. And that's the thing about all this is like, there are lots of truth to these ideas. Will there be people that stand up that God might lead to confront systems and structures that are evil? Yeah, that happens all the time. It's happened over the last 2,000 years plus. Does that mean that they are an apostle or a prophet? No. I mean, it just means that they're a person doing what they're called to do in that time of life. But I definitely think that the supernatural element, needing this encounter to get to this place of being called, is something that we all wanted and most of us never got, in the way that Mike would talk about it. Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, and what it does is, I actually did hold out to be one of the 35 because I thought 35, that's actually a lot of people. I'm not really seeing a lot of I'm not seeing a lot of hope out here. I'm like, there seems to be some room. There seems to be some empty chariots still, but yeah, what it does, it's obvious to me that what it does is it creates a super category of people that you can strive to be included in. And then if you're not included in, so if you can strive to be included in, so that if you are included in, you are the elite. And if you're not included in, you're still a part of this system, but now you know who's in charge. So it creates a real clear separation of, if you're at IHOP long enough, who is having dreams and visions and encounters, and you know who isn't, because everybody that is are telling their stories, and everyone else is fasting and praying to get their own.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Number 5, Billion Soul Prophecy from Bob Jones.
Yeah, so the Billion Soul Prophecy is just that there's going to be this massive Christian revival, and that this would be part of this end time movement, that this would have to do with these houses of prayer. This would be right before Jesus returns. The book of Revelation would be happening, and there would be 1 billion converts to Christianity. And that was a promise. I mean, that was going to be a direct result of us as the house of prayer and doing these stadium meetings and so forth. And it just has a nice ring to it. 1 billion souls.
Yeah, it does. It's easy to jump onto for sure. All right.
Mike loves the word billion.
Billion. All right. Let's do number 6, the Blueprint Prophecy and Black Horse Prophecy.
Yeah, so the Blueprint and Black Horse Prophecy go together. The Blueprint Prophecy is this document that got dropped off at the church in the 80s, and it has all these different things in there, and it's referred to as the Blueprint Prophecy. And then supposedly it was also confirmed by an angelic visitation of Michael the Archangel, and somehow it was confirmed by the visiting of a demonic principality also called the Black Horse. So the Black Horse and Michael the Archangel were warring against each other, and so the future application for this for the IHOP movement, the IHOP ministry and movement, were that Mike Bickle and Michael the archangel go together because they are the guardian of Israel. Because in the Bible, Michael is the archangel guarding the nation of Israel in the book of Daniel. And then the black horse is this demonic principality coming against Israel. And kind of like if you're coming against Israel, you have to get through the black horse. And so that story basically set up us while we were there, us staff, and yeah, and the staff, the leaders, any of us who were there to interpret any opposition as persecution or any confrontation as demonic, and any disagreement as having to do with this larger storyline where there's this satanic plan against Israel, and
Part of that is to stop the prayer movement, to stop the white
yeah,
hole.
and it's to stop the prayer movement, stop Israel from being saved, stop Jesus Christ from coming back. And there was kind of this idea of like, if you can stop the prayer for Israel, then you can stop Israel from converting to Christ. And if you stop Israel from converting to Christ, then they never say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And then Jesus doesn't come back until they say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." So then the second coming is just perpetually delayed by not praying for Israel and not having this prayer movement, not having IHOP. So no IHOP, no Israel being converted, no second coming.
That
That's
is
a lot.
literally what, and I see people ask about that now. Why do they keep talking about Israel? What's the deal? It's like I was saying earlier, Isaac is going to continue pushing this. Any leader of IHOP is going to push the Israel narrative because without, in their mind, because of this prophecy, the black horse prophecy was basically saying that anything that's coming against the prayer movement, which is the white horse, is a demonic attack. And that demonic attack, even if it's legitimate, so let's say that, Mike Bickle is guilty of all that's being alleged, then it's still a black horse stopping the white horse prayer movement from praying for Israel, which would stop the hastening the day of the Lord's return. And it's all surrounding this movement. And that's why that prophetic history is, I would say, propped up. It's an idol that they cannot let go of, because then they have to recognize that this prayer movement is not because of the Bible. It's because of, Isaac said it in that last Sunday service. He said, God said I would set watchmen on Israel's walls to pray for them. God said that he would do this. This is in the Bible. We're not doing it because of the prophetic history. While in the same breath, he was quoting from the prophetic history right before that. So this is so deep in IHOPers. It was deep in us for years. So I'm not pointing the finger. I'm just saying it's deep in IHOPers to hold
Yeah.
on to this. And if they lose that piece, people don't have the motivation. Worship is great. Musical worship is great. But you don't have to keep showing up, clanging the cymbal every day, so that Jesus can come back. He's going to come back without, yeah.
So, talk, if you remember, right before the first initial allegations came out, that Mike Bickle was preaching this black horse prophecy, right? The few weeks right before that.
Yeah, he was talking about this in October, right, Austin?
Oh yeah, yep.
So is that like a normal thing though? Like you're saying they talk about the prophetic history all the time, and like did they talk about the black horse, pretty often, or was this like something's about to happen and I want you guys to know it's the black horse?
Yeah, it was on a cycle. And so it wasn't all the time, but it was on a cycle. And the idea that we kind of go through the missions base or the camp, or at least somehow the inside a certain group of people would be something like different ones, different individuals are being alerted by God through dreams, through senses, whatever, that another attack against IHOP is coming. And of course, really what that meant is like they know there's a problem and it's like getting beyond their control. So now it's time to go into Black Horse damage control or pre damage control. But it would be cyclical, and it would be roll out the Black Horse, roll out the Ernie Gruen history, roll out the another vision. Another element of the vision of the white horse was that there were these dogs on the side of the river. The white horse is in a river in the water. There's dogs on the bank of the river, and these dogs would be kind of like the black horse. They would be opposing this horse, and so you'd roll out the rabid dogs.
Barking dogs. Don't listen to the. So
That's
people.
us, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that what people call us?
People, if you're really in the movement, anybody that speaks against the movement or in any way demotivates you from praying in the prayer room or being a part of the movement is a barking dog. It's a rabid dog that doesn't have the ability to drink the pure water of the river anymore. That's what Bob Jones said. He said the barking dogs are rabid. They can't drink the water that the white horse is standing in, which is the water of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea was also that
Sounds like a
these
Rick
dogs have
Joyner book.
rabies. So if they get near you, they're going to bite you. You're going to get the rabies.
Yeah.
So it also keeps this us and them thing where you don't want to you don't want to hang out with these people. Just stop talking to them, cut them off. You don't want to get the rabies.
Well, I remember Austin back when we were there. I mean, I had a guy. Well, right before I left to go to IHOP in 2007 or 8, I had a guy send me the Ernie Gruen thing, and I looked at it and I was like, I'm not gonna read this. Then when I was there, I remember another guy kind of like started talking about grace and just like you don't have to do all this stuff. And this was 2010 or 11. And I remember you and I talking about it. And so I remember like, yeah, these guys are they're like the rabid dogs. They can't handle
They're trying to get
it.
us off track.
Yeah. And they're off track.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of cut off any message that doesn't vibe with what you're listening to that keeps you in the prayer movement, which is the prayer room. It's not about Jesus. It's about the movement. It was always, even though I would say I was about Jesus and I was about my relationship with Jesus, the movement became so important that it's like it fogs your relationship with Jesus, and now you're really in a relationship with this movement. So focused on keeping this movement going.
I have a question. This is kind of a side note, but you guys may not even know the answer. But so there's all these others, IHOP, and then there's all these other house of prayers all over the place. Do they teach the prophetic history also that you know of, or do you know?
Man, that is a really good question. And let me just, if it's okay, let me just hit number 7 quickly.
Yeah.
And
Go
say,
ahead.
all I'm going to say is number 7 is the Jesus in Red and the turn word prophecy from Mike Bickle and Shelley Hunley. And I just want to say, like, to anyone listening, just go look up what is the turn word from Shelley Hunley. And that's a recording. There's a couple of recordings out there, a couple hours of recording. And you'll go through that whole prophecy and her saying Jesus appeared to her in just after 9/11 in early 2002, I believe it is. I'm forgetting exactly when, but go look it up, and then you'll get an idea about that. But that was a huge influence on me, a huge influence on people who were there 2005 to 2013 for sure.
Yeah, and
But
Jesus in
like
Red was
Chris,
Isaiah 63, and that
yeah,
Jesus would return. When he returns, he is, he's going to have blood on his garments, etc. So the whole thing was taking a vision from a prophet, Terry Bennett, actually, to Mike Bickle and said, you need to preach the Jesus in Red. Jesus just walked up to me and read, you need to preach the Jesus in Red. And Mike Bickle said that he had just been reading Isaiah 63 that very moment. And so he turned it into, this big thing. And then Shelley Hunley, I remember that word, which was the fear of the Lord and the love of God. And basically saying you need to preach the fear of the Lord and the love of God. I kind of remember it as you're not doing this. IHOP is not doing this. I kind of remember Shelley's word being kind of like almost like a rebuke to IHOP in some senses. Am I right on that?
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I would say that the general message was the general idea was you are making you're going to be tempted to make Jesus really palatable or really one-sided by using some verses about him and cutting out other verses, um, like Isaiah 63, Revelation 19. And the idea was you have to include that. And then if you don't, there's going to be consequences. But also, if you don't, one of the consequences from the vision that Shelley had was in the vision, she says, Jesus says, I will tear down IHOP.
I
You know,
remember.
Wow.
Jesus says, I will destroy IHOP if you don't have the fear of God here and if you don't have the love of God here. Um,
Yeah.
that was in 2002. But yeah, there's so much more information on those seven, and we could spend a couple hours on each one of those seven for sure. But I hope that helps some people kind of as an introduction.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely very informative
It's
for
probably
me. And yeah.
more systematic than I've ever broken it down for you, for sure.
I wanted to answer your question, Christina, because I have a place to go next in my mind, and that was a really good segue, which is your question. Are these other houses of prayer, I mean, really around the world now, are they involved in the prophetic history? And one of the things that Mike did is, Blaise was talking about it earlier, is he would insert something into just a Bible teaching. So it's just a teaching on John 15, abiding in the vine, and what does it mean to abide in Christ? And then somewhere in there, he would just insert something from the prophetic history. And of course, that's all subconsciously or consciously being continually pumped in us as the staff and students and interns and so forth. But then in these other houses of prayer, you have those prophetic promises in the background explaining why the house of prayer is happening in general. But then this is what's crazy is these guys, Paul Cain, Bob Jones, a number of other people who were considered these prophetic important people, they stopped allowing them to come around after the 90s. They really dialed it down in the 90s and almost got rid of all of these people. And then by 2004 or and then kind of in a final way in 2006 with Paul Cain, they just got rid of these people so that we who are at IHOP are hearing all of these stories. And it's like we're hearing stories about, the spiritual grandfathers of our movement. And it's almost like these people are dead. And that's why we're hearing the stories.
So
But they
true.
weren't even dead. They were just living somewhere else. But Mike
And
never brought them in.
they weren't allowed to come. Also, there's
They
probably
literally were
multiple
not allowed to
reasons.
come back.
There's multiple reasons. I'm guessing. I'm just going to say this. Number one, legally, they couldn't come because there was situations where they had abused people, and then. But number two, I think that because the stories were changing, Mike controlled the narrative on the stories now. So if they
Yeah.
came and told the story differently, it could change everybody's perception of what actually happened.
You guys are talking about Bob Jones and Paul
Paul
Cain.
Cain, those two
Like,
specifically.
at first, they would come to IHOP, and then they just stopped coming, and y'all would talk about
Paul
it.
wasn't allowed to come anymore in 2004 because he got outed as a sexual abuser. And Mike outed him with Jack Deere,
And then how did he continue that prophecy with his name in it? Did he say anything about that whenever y'all would talk about it later? Be like,
Didn't Mike
did he like address it?
didn't Mike just diminish Paul a little bit in the prophecies? He would use some of his stuff, but didn't use it near as much.
Well, what he did was after 2006, he stopped talking about Paul publicly from stage so that if you're a new person in the community, you're not hearing it from stage. If you're streaming it online, most importantly, you're not hearing it from the stage anymore. So it is as though, from an outsider's view, Paul Cain has been disowned. But on the inside, remember those recordings from 2002 that are required, those 12 CDs required listening. There's like almost 2 hours of stuff about Paul Cain on those, and it's required listening for everybody coming in.
Mm.
So you're still getting all the stories, all the stuff about Paul Cain, but then the official story and what's being broadcast to anybody outside of IHOP is that Paul Cain is kind of disowned and he's not mentioned anymore until he dies in 2019.
Yeah. So the other houses of prayer, I'm thinking like House of Prayer Atlanta.
Yeah.
Like Mike would always say, "Oh yeah, we don't have franchises." He would be like, "No, no, no, we don't have franchises. We don't start other houses of prayer. We focus on what we're called to do." But people would come in all the time and get like the House of Prayer DNA. They would have these. They had intro to IHOP. They had these 3-month deals where you could come in and kind of just get inundated. And what would you get inundated with? The prayer culture and the prophetic history. And then you kind of get taught, in some senses, how to not only hear that over and over, then you go off and you kind of create your own prophetic history. I don't know this for a fact, but I bet there's, if you go to these different houses of prayer, they have their own little mini versions. Oh, jeez, I'll edit that out. They have their mini versions of their prophetic history, most likely.
Yeah.
But it's probably connected to, being involved in some way, shape, or form with IHOP Kansas City. So,
Well, and how they have, and I know this for a fact because I went to a bunch of them, how they do have their own prophetic history. So they have the Kansas City prophetic history, which is kind of the why does IHOP exist in the first place, is because Mike Bickle's an apostle and all the angels came and all the stories. But then how does our little house of prayer exist? Well, all of these prophetic quote unquote prophets or prophetic people out here, Paul Cain, Bob Jones, you've got the next level down kind of is I'll just throw some other names out there: Jill Austin, Bob Hartley, and a variety of others. These people are, and actually even below them, you can put below them, with them, below them. I don't know, but another
their
group.
downline.
Yeah, Alan Hood, Corey Russell. These people are traveling around. And one of the things they're doing at all these little houses of prayer are giving prophecies. And a bunch of those prophecies are like a personalized version of something in the bigger prophetic history. So it's like
Yep.
we have this big story, of the apostles coming, but here's a local story for your Atlanta group. And maybe it's like, you, the leader of the Atlanta House of Prayer, are going to be one of the 35. So then now this story of this plugs directly into the big story. And then you go even more personal. This is really, in my view, a really critical piece of understanding how this functions as a cult. Then you have this individual level prophecy where one of these, again, these big name people gives you an individual prophecy for you that also ties in to these bigger stories, so that now your life, your choices, your future, your marriage, your family is directly tied into, it's part of achieving these larger prophecies and is directly tied to these larger prophecies, so that they have to happen for you and your individual destiny and prophecies to happen, and vice versa. They help each other uh, be fulfilled, and that keeps people on the hamster wheel. That keeps you in the group, that keeps you in the cult, because now to leave would be to abandon your own destiny, because
Yeah.
now it's not just Mike heard it. Now it's not just Alan Hood heard it, or your leader at IHOP Atlanta heard it. They heard it, and they heard it, and now you have heard it for yourself, that you have a critical role in this.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to when I was the first time I told Stuart that I was going to leave was in 2009 or maybe 10. I didn't leave till 12, but and he told me directly, he said, "I don't think that's a good idea. I believe your destiny is here in this movement." It's a big word. It's a big phrase. He didn't do it, "Thus says the Lord." He just said, "I believe this." And I mean, yeah, that was a big. To leave there was so jarring, and it was honestly very freeing though too. I remember sitting outside a uh, a restaurant after I had left, and I was eating a burger, and I remember this is going to sound so funny. I was eating this burger, and I was enjoying it in a way that I hadn't enjoyed food in like 5 years. And I don't mean that like I was like overeating or anything like that. I was just literally going. I was looking at the sunshine. I was sitting outside. I had this job at a coffee shop at the time, and at the roastery in Kansas City. You remember that? And I was sitting out there eating this burger and going, because there's this asceticism that sets into your life. You're
Yeah.
fasting, you're praying for the vision, for the encounter, for the future, for you want to be the next Daniel. You want to, nothing wrong with fasting and prayer, absolutely nothing. But I'm telling you, when it becomes your God, because you're trying to reach a certain level based on doing these things, and you don't even realize you're doing it. Most of it was out of sincerity. I couldn't even enjoy like the basic things anymore, like living my life and grabbing a bite to eat. And like I didn't really enjoy food in that way. This sounds so crazy now, 10 years out, but I'm like I remember sitting outside that burger place and eating and just going, wow, I love life. I'm thankful for
Yeah.
life. And that was not something that I experienced when I was at IHOP. Everything
Yeah.
was so intense. And I mean, I experienced good times. There were great people. You and I laughed a lot. I mean, it's not like we didn't have a sense of humor throughout that time,
Oh
but
yeah.
there was a lot of self-deprecation and asceticism, that was constant. And
Yeah.
yeah, just processing out loud with y'all as my therapist here.
Yeah. I mean, that's. I bet a lot of people relate to that.
Yeah.
Going to enjoy some entertainment, go enjoy a movie, go enjoy some music, go enjoy a hamburger. I mean, it does sound crazy, and uh, but I mean that's the truth, is that in that place there were uh, bigger fish to fry. I mean, there were more important things being given to you every day when you woke up. You were gonna, all the 7 things we just rattled off. What are you gonna do? Go eat this hamburger? Or are you gonna go and fill the stadium?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why people valued, and I in some senses looking back, I'm like, we wouldn't have met if I hadn't left IHOP Kansas City. I definitely, like, you wouldn't have vibed with that culture at all, and
Yeah. No way.
we wouldn't have vibed because of that. And so, but as I think about it too, like, to be married in that culture, I have no idea what that's like, but I hear stories now of people's
Yeah.
marriages that blew up because the husband was constantly spending extra time in the prayer room. The wife's at home literally just chasing the kids around trying to raise these kids, and the husband's not working, but working at the prayer room constantly and working to raise support and barely making it for a family. And you're like, what? Like, what? You know, I mean, it's mind blowing. I can't imagine the stories that are out there of
Yeah.
families. It's very sad, actually, to think about.
Yeah. 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 And I'm sure some people made it through okay, but it is not an environment that is conducive to healthy marriage, healthy relationships, healthy family. And so it's against all odds if you make it through with that.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happened, but you're not getting any help. You're not getting any help from there.
Yeah. Christina,
Yeah.
any other current thoughts on what we're talking about right now, or just anything that Austin said, or questions?
I do have a question. Talking about whenever you first started questioning the prophetic history, and then whenever you guys left, was that your main reason? Because you had realized, you had like decided this actually doesn't work. Is that the main reason you left?
Yeah, for me personally, it was perfect timing combined with wanting to get married. So I wanted to get married, and as soon as I realized I want to marry this woman, I also realized, wow, being broke is really not going to work now. I mean, it really worked to be at IHOP
You're like, I
and
can hang out
do
with
all these different
Blaise
roles.
broke and run around, but like, I can't be like marrying Angela broke.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with day old Panera, but she is not going to be. And the Higher Grounds Bagel, you know,
QT 1 a.m. runs.
yeah, QT Run, shout out David May. Uh, yeah, and so it was perfect timing because I wanted to get married. This is already happening. I'm already questioning some things, and but I know like I got to go get a job somewhere because the money never came. So I have to figure out how to go to college, how to get a career, how to get a job. So that's all on my mind. And then also, um, because of this relationship that I had started, which ended up being my wife, um, I brought it up to a couple of people during this time of questioning, and I brought up my relationship, and several people were like, "She doesn't really seem into IHOP. She really doesn't seem like committed to the mission and committed to the thing here. Are you sure like this is the one?"
Wow.
And I remember talking to Angela about it, and she just thought like, she did not get it. She did not get the IHOP thing. And even though she on some sang on some sets, and she was just like, yeah, I'm not into it. And so that was also a red flag to me
Mm-hmm.
from these people, because I'm like, that's not a character default.
Right.
um, and I just saw I saw what they were seeing, which is that uh, my commitment is going to be affected by her. It's not that it's not that she's not committed. It's just that I won't be committed. I'm not going to be working here for free anymore if we get married.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
Um,
that's
so
what kind of
yeah,
shook you out.
yeah. So for me, it was the culmination of both of those things. There was theological things too that I was questioning a few things, asking some questions, and people were unwilling to view a lot of theological points uh, from any other perspective than the set Mike Bickle perspective. Like what's on Mike Bickle's notes, that's what goes. And then the prophetic history discrepancies. And then again, just asking some of these questions and people pushing back um, on individuals. I mean, just the fact that people were saying, were talking bad about Blaise and our other friend, I know them very well. I'm going, yeah, that's all these people are doing is showing their cards to me. I didn't think they were cult leaders until I started asking these questions, and they're talking about Blaise and our friend this way. They're talking about um, they're unwilling to field questions theological, and they're unwilling to field questions about the prophetic history. Now it's just cult vibes all around.
Hmm.
That's kind of how I left.
And then whenever you were posting, I know you met with people privately about the prophetic history, but then whenever you were like
Yeah,
posting on Facebook, only know this because I've seen your memories that you reshare recently of things you said in like 2013, right?
yeah.
So whenever you started doing that, because you kind of grew up in this movement, your family was there. Did your what did your family think or about you publicly like going after the prophetic history? Was
Yeah, my family didn't really care. Um, yeah, because my family was not really that involved.
okay.
Yeah, by that point they
Anymore,
really weren't
basically.
involved. Yeah, and but it was really, my Facebook friends, because my Facebook friends, when you're on staff for a few years, it only takes a couple of years and all you know are IHOPers. So
Yeah.
because for this reason and for that reason, you just end up cutting all these people off. So if you do have a Facebook, they're all going to be IHOP Facebook friends, unless you came from a previous ministry and you bring all those people. Uh, so the real key there was I knew I was posting these things, and I knew that my Facebook audience was 100% IHOPers. um, I knew I was just, and that's why we got in trouble. I mean, that's why we got in trouble with these leaders, is because this is the early days of I mean, yeah, it's not that early, but still kind of the early days of social media. And me and Blaise and our friend were pretty active, and probably some of the most active on social media um, within the IHOP world. And so we kind of have a direct line to all of these people
Mm-hmm.
within the group that had previously been mostly message controlled by like Mike and the ELT. And now there's like a crack in there that Stuart called the portal of darkness called social media.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that's what I noticed about you guys' meetings or whenever we talked about it. It was like it didn't seem like they were like concerned for your soul or concerned about your like theology. It was more like concerned about your influence over all of the people who are still there.
It's a good point, and I think there's still part of me that's thought, I think they were just genuinely concerned about us, but I think you're right that they were concerned about the influence we were having over their interns and their staff by simply asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I have one last
Yeah,
question.
and making and making statements. I mean, that's the other thing
Yeah, we weren't
is
just asking questions. We were actually making pretty strong statements too.
yeah, but they were in conjunction with each other, and we're just young people, and I mean, I look back and look at these people in their 20s asking questions, making statements, trying to figure out what they believe,
That
and
should be okay. That should be more than okay.
I mean, it's pretty normal. Seems pretty normal to me now.
Mm-hmm.
um, but again, I think they saw that there's a crack in the wall, and the crack is this social media influencing getting in, because we have all the messaging on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, prophetic history, all the materials at the bookstore, and you're so busy there. I mean, you're not getting outside influence. I mean, you're committing to 20, what was it, 24 hours of prayer room time.
And 24
I
hours
get this
of
right?
service time. Yeah, 24 hours of service time per week. 24 hours of prayer room, 24 hours. So you're 50-hour week for a full-time staffer.
At the
6 days a
base
week.
level.
Yeah, at the base level. 6 days a
And then
week,
if you
one
have
day
a
off.
position, yeah, then your position is just whatever else your responsibilities are on top of that. And then you're at a service every Friday night, every Saturday night, every Sunday morning. And then, um, we don't close for holidays. So, I mean, I spent a number of, I spent many, but virtually all holidays there, a number of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. I'm just one of the only people there. A lot of people did leave and go home for Christmas or whatever, but a lot of us are there. Um,
You were there in the
and
prayer room
just
Christmas Day.
yeah, oh yeah, Thanksgiving, Christmas, July 4th. I mean, the whole deal. Just you know, we're doing our mission. We're filling the bowls in heaven. We're going to fill the stadiums. We're going to trigger the return of Christ. And so help me if I have to skip turkey dinner and fireworks to do that. No, I mean that's the
You had one more question.
Okay, last question. Sorry, I know it is late. So whenever you guys left, y'all left, and then I know Blaise had his blog. He wrote, all this stuff on social media. Then he had a time where he wanted to reconnect with Stuart. So he emailed Stuart and Sliker, right? Reconnected, not going there, but just reconnected over email, and I guess kind of like
Tried to smooth it over, make things right.
reconcile. And then you can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you had a reconnection as well during your, if that's not true, tell me, but during that reconnection, did you still, did you ever go back and be like, maybe the prophetic history is true? Or were you just like, I just don't want any bad blood. I don't believe this stuff, but let's all just be cool? Or what was that like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I went back and in 2019 and I had a whole list of people, all ELT basically, a couple people who weren't, and I made things right with them. And really, I just apologized to all of them. Um, and I felt like I had something I needed to apologize for each one of them. Um, so I did that, including Mike, and scheduled meetings with all these people and apologized to them and said, I feel like um, need to apologize for the way, not the way I've spoken about you, but specific things that I had said um, after leaving, um, maybe around a fire pit some night. I'm just having a drink and with friends, and I'm just saying something off the cuff that's totally um, false about Mike Bickle. I mean, I remember saying some things like, "I bet Mike has bodies in his basement," and and I really wanted to go back and apologize to Mike for saying that, and so that's something that's coming to mind. And then there were just different things for other people. And yeah, for me, it was just like clearing out this list and totally owning um, not my part in leaving IHOP or any of that time, but just after leaving, my part in, yeah, just saying something that's not true, and just um, and so yeah, so I did. And when I met with Mike, I mean, it was maybe I'll talk about that meeting another time, but it was a strange meeting. But but during that time, I think part of me wanted to think some of this prophetic history is true, and some of it I know it isn't accurate or true, but some of it is, and that I thought that completely went away. I thought I had completely come to this point where no, it's all either inaccurate or made up or somehow a combination of um, maybe a combination of fabrication or misinterpretation, um, or imagination, like where people are not purposefully lying, but they're just closing their eyes and saying, I'm seeing this and I'm seeing that, and then ascribing meaning to it. But even until today, um, I thought that I didn't believe any of this, and even today, when I've when I read this Kansas City Star article about 418, I was shocked. And I mean, I had already kind of come to the conclusion, like, yeah, they made all this stuff up. This is Mike's creation, and still I was shocked when Judy brought out this evidence that they went and found a death certificate and tombstone and this evidence, and I'm just sitting there like in shock, like, oh my God, they made this up. So I didn't even know I believed that still until I read the article.
Yeah.
So it's hard to describe how deep that is in my mind, because I've been hearing it and reading it and memorizing it and singing it, from age 17 to 25, and probably tens of thousands of times. It's just somehow it's just in there still.
Hmm.
Yeah, after all these years, and so yeah, do I believe it now? I don't think so.
It's like, I hope not. Well,
um,
thanks for just being candid and
Yeah.
honest and open and
yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, it did. That was a great answer.
yeah. I think we'll wrap part one here, and
yeah,
we may come back for part two. We'll see, but we'll see how part one does.
yeah,
No, Austin, this was great, man. This was
Thank you
great.
so much. And thank you for everything that all the time and energy you're putting into researching. And everyone should follow him on Twitter. He puts out a ton of great
Information. Yeah, and like literally we'll be like, where did you get this video? It's like
I know.
literally
Also, I'm like, where do
it's
you
like
find
a
this?
fuzzy VHS video from like 1981 or something. It's like Mike Bickle on a playground at age 5 or something. Not really. But there's all this
coming soon.
prophetic history stuff, So if you're interested in this information and kind of following along, then get on Twitter, start an X account, and follow Austin at Starchasm, StarCazm, on Twitter. He's pretty much utilizing his Twitter account just for this, it seems like right now. So go follow along there. And comment below if you have questions about what we talked about tonight.
If you have a question for Austin,
please do. Yeah, seriously.
Part 2 Q&A.
Yeah, throw down some questions or comments, or let us know kind of what you think. I mean, I was just very struck there at the end by what you said about believing and how often how deep this stuff gets in you. Because in 2018, 2019, when I made reconciliation, I really feel like it was, call it the Lord leading me or whatever you want to call it, but I really felt like, for a matter of conscience, in my heart, there were things that I wish I had done differently in my separation from IHOP that I wanted to apologize for. I even said in some of my emails, hey, this is not trying to hash out all the beliefs about everything. This is really just about this and this and this. And this is when I just thought these guys all have good intentions. That's what I thought. Mike Bickle, good intentions, doesn't lack character. Dave Sliker, Stuart Greaves. at this stage of the game, after watching everything play out, we know with Mike Bickle, at least, that what's gone on since he was age 20. I mean, 4+ decades, what's gone on in the abuse factor. But even with the other ones, it's like, either they have ill intent or lack character, or are that deceived. One of those three things, But I think even what you said, I go, man, it's still startling to me to let go of some of these things. And I'm 10 years out from a lot of it. But even back in 2019, we started listening to Bickle again. She had never listened. I was like, listen to this, and we're listening to some of his recent prophetic history stuff from 2020. We were listening to that, over a year ago. And so it's just crazy to kind of still unravel even after 10 years out, because I think I said this in our last episode, but if you want to believe about this view of the end times, that's fine. There's certain views of the end times that are historical views that have been held by many, many Christians over the years. But if you start turning your prophetic history, you start utilizing this prophetic history to back up your belief and then push people in a certain direction to create this lifestyle that builds up this movement, then things can get a little bit crazy. And I would say to people that are in the IHOP world, if you want to believe this idea about the end times, this theological or eschatological view, that's fine. Maybe just go somewhere else to believe it. Go get a better, well-rounded view and go learn to live life and work with your hands. One of the healthiest things I've seen from you, Austin, is when you left and got a job and you got married and you're having kids, and it's just awesome. I mean, it's just so cool to see. And you have a genuine love for the Lord that I've seen over the years, and a very down-to-earth life. We're just doing life and taking care of your family. And so anyway, all that said, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for your time. I know it's real late, and we had to do it late because we get our kids to sleep. I know that you got your kiddo to sleep, and you're expecting a new one here pretty soon. So maybe the next part 2, you'll have a baby in your arms. We'll see. Thanks, Austin. Until next time.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate you, and especially the outsider, Christina, for putting up with us, ex-cult member leaders. No, I really appreciate you guys, and yeah, we should do it again sometime, and if not on the stream, in person.
Man, that would be fun. Are you talking about the stream? Are you talking about the White Horse stream with the barking?
White Horse in the stream. Keep it in the stream.
Keep it in the stream. All right. Thanks, everybody. God bless you guys, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.